On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive joint strike on Iran. Within minutes, Iran's supreme leader was dead. Dozens of Iran's top military commanders, gone. Iran struck back, hard, and more than a week later, the fighting hasn't stopped. 7 American service members have been killed in combat. Around 140 have been wounded. Oil prices spiked to levels not seen since COVID. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil flows, has ground to a near halt. This is what happened, why it happened, and what it means for you. To understand why America went to war with Iran, you need to go back a few months. At his State of the Union in late February, Trump declared that Iran had restarted its nuclear program and was developing missiles capable of reaching the United States. Days later, the IAEA confirmed hidden, highly enriched uranium in an underground Iranian facility. The agency said it couldn't be certain Iran's program was exclusively peaceful. At the same time, Iran was collapsing from within, gripped by the largest anti-government protests since 1979, driven by economic freefall and rising prices. The government's response? Massacres. Behind the scenes, Saudi Arabia and Israel had been lobbying Trump directly and repeatedly to strike. On February 28th, he gave the order. The attack, codenamed Operation Epic Fury, began at dawn. The first strike killed Khamenei. By the end of day 1, targets had been hit across at least 26 of Iran's 31 provinces. Iran's military took devastating blows. Nuclear sites struck. Its state broadcaster went dark. Even parliament was targeted. By day 11, more than 5,000 targets had been hit. More than 1,200 Iranians have been killed, according to health officials, with that number still climbing. Within hours of the first strikes, however, Iran launched waves of missiles and drones at Israel. A ballistic missile strike on Beit Shemesh in central Israel killed 9 people. But Iran's retaliation didn't stop at Israel. It targeted American troops across the region, bases in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, and Jordan. Most attacks were intercepted, but not all. 7 Americans have been killed, most from an Iranian drone attack on a base in Kuwait. Around 140 others were wounded, though the Pentagon says most injuries were minor and over 100 have already returned to duty. Iran also struck energy infrastructure across the Gulf, refineries in Saudi Arabia, gas facilities in Qatar, and drone attacks on Bahrain and the UAE. On day 8, Iran named Mojtaba Khamenei, the late Supreme Leader's son, as the country's new leader. A clear signal that Iran intends to keep fighting. By day 12, Iran had launched its 37th wave of attacks. Their foreign minister told CNN, "No room for diplomacy." Back home, the reaction has been anything but united. Trump notified Congress under the War Powers Act on March 2nd, but did not seek a formal authorization for the use of military force. The war's most controversial moment came on March 1st, when a U.S. strike hit a girls' school in Iran, killing roughly 175 students. The New York Times reported this week that preliminary findings indicate that the U.S. struck the school using outdated targeting data. UN human rights experts have described the strike as a potential war crime. Trump has said he'll accept whatever the investigation finds, but senators from both parties are now demanding public hearings and questioning the administration's strategy as civilian casualties mount. Meanwhile, Trump's messaging on the war has been contradictory, calling it very complete in one breath and saying the U.S. still needs ultimate victory in another. Defense Secretary Hegseth called Day 11 the most intense day of strikes yet. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway between Iran and Oman, is effectively closed. About 1/5 of the world's oil passes through it. So does 1/5 of its LNG supply, and nearly 1/3 of global fertilizer exports. Iran declared the strait closed on March 2nd and has been actively mining it. On day 11, U.S. forces destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels in the strait, but hundreds of ships remain stranded. The IEA reports that export volumes through Hormuz are now at less than 10% of pre-war levels. The economic consequences have been immediate. Oil prices surged from under $70 a barrel before the war to a peak of nearly $120, the biggest spike since COVID. Brent crude is now sitting around $90, but markets remain volatile. U.S. gas prices have crossed $4 a gallon. Qatar's LNG halt has pushed European natural gas prices to nearly double, and fertilizer shipments cut off ahead of spring planting season mean food prices could follow. In response, the IEA announced today the largest emergency oil reserve release in its history, 400 million barrels, more than double what was released after Russia invaded Ukraine. The U.S. alone is contributing 172 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But the IEA chief was direct. The reserves buy time. The real solution is reopening the strait. So where does this end? Nobody in Washington can agree, including the president. Trump has sent mixed signals all week. Iran has a new supreme leader and a devastated military, but they're still launching missiles. The conflict is continuing to develop, and the U.S. is still ramping up, not winding down. What happens in the strait, in the next wave of strikes, or at a negotiating table that doesn't yet exist, will determine whether this ends in weeks or becomes something far larger. What could this mean for the U.S.? Iran was struck without a formal declaration of war. Was that the right call? Or does Congress need to reassert its authority over when America goes to war? Subscribe for more and let us know in the comments.